Right, on that note, let's move on. It's time for Head to Head. Head to Head. Well, I'm delighted to say joining us this morning, Luke Hiljar, Director of the High Pay Centre, also Lettice Bromovsky, who is a political commentator. Good morning to the two of you.
Good morning.
Right, let's start, shall we, with this story. I think it's worth just talking about it again, because I'm saying, what is the point of party conferences? And I got thinking about this, because I wasn't quite sure who they were talking to. Clearly no one in the room, because there wasn't anyone in the room. Are they talking to us? Are they talking to the press? Are they talking to themselves? And as I was saying, the Conservatives really haven't seen a bounce. I thought in some ways Rishi Sunak, I suppose, was quite brave to cancel HS2. He also did the smoking ban, which I think there are massive problems with that. As we said, you're going to end up with a 76-year-old buying cigarettes for a 75-year-old, which seems rather ridiculous. And the review of education. How did Rishi Sunak do you think, Lettice?
Honestly, he tried to position himself as this candidate for change and all of this. There was no change there. There was no vision of a future there. Like you said, his policies were ban on smoking, scrapping A-levels, scrapping HS2. I didn't get any sense of this is where I want us to be in 10 years' time. This is where I want our country to be at the next election.
But I suppose in some ways he's saying we need to invest in the education system. We need people to have maths and English until they're 18. Isn't that a good thing?
He's trying to invest in an education system in a policy that would take at least 10 years to implement realistically. And in we've only just reformed our A-levels. We took it from the ABC system to the 1-2-3 system, and this is just another system. Ultimately, maths and English and academia in that sense is not for everyone. And it's never going to be for everyone. So forcing it onto people, I don't think is the way
And
forward.
what about HS2? Was that brave?
I wouldn't call it brave. I think, again, this is just another failed policy.
But isn't the easy route to say, yeah, actually, we'll carry it on and we'll finish it?
I don't think it's the easy route. There does come a point where there is not an argument for funneling more money into a policy and a desire for infrastructure which is overgrown. I also think there was a sense of arrogance in it. Give the money to level up the North. The North doesn't necessarily have to be connected to London by a 12-minute faster train.
But so Luke, this is the issue, isn't it? The fact is it was poorly constructed, poorly designed. Actually, there's no business case for HS2. Was he brave?
The HS2 thing, well, I think a lot of it is about capacity and just creating more trains going from London to Birmingham, Manchester, as much as but there'd be more trains as much as faster trains. Right. So I think that was part of the case for it. I do think it's a difficult one because obviously the costs have gone up and up and up, and I think it's right to have the discussion about why that is. On the other hand, with pieces of infrastructure, do you think that the Channel Tunnel, I think apparently people even said it about the completion of the M25. When you're building them, people always moan about the cost, and then once they get built, you can't live without them.
But this cost was exponentially higher than what was originally planned.
It was. I mean, I think
capacity has changed.
Well, so
changed,
that's the really important point. COVID changed everything because people started working at home. They realised they didn't have to go from Liverpool down to London or Manchester to London. They can do it on Skype, on Zoom. So if the figures have changed, is he right then to change his decision?
I think there is a case for that. I mean, also there's a question of how he's going to use the savings. As you say, there hasn't been this bounce in the polls, and it was interesting reading a focus group yesterday of people responding to the announcement in the North, and none of them believe that he's going to spend the money on local transport infrastructure projects. What's to say the cost of those won't get out of hand? He won't scrap those. So I think there is also a point about when you've committed to something. I know businesses in the Midlands and the Northwest have been really critical of it as well, because they plan long term and they've made assumptions on the basis that this is going to happen. So I think once you've once you've started something and spent money on it, got spades in the ground, to abandon it halfway, for that particular project, it's obviously not good, but also what it does for the reputation of government and the certainty that people can have in other decisions as well.
I wonder if he was thinking, well, if I scrap this now, Labour are going to be faced, if they get into power, with, well, do you reinstate it? And he might have been playing on that. But I was looking back at Starmer's voting record on this. He never supported HS2. He never wanted it.
That's right.
Starmer may be rubbing his hands together, thinking, God,
but I don't think he is. You see, is is this political gaming? Because Starmer can't actually confirm whether he would carry on. Also, you've now got a railway from Manchester to Old Oak Common.
Well,
I mean, who wants to go to Old Oak Common?
That's exactly what I was about to say. They haven't even officially confirmed, in what was quite a misleading end to the speech from Rishi, haven't even confirmed that it'll go to Euston. It'll go to some random station outside London unless they can get the private funding for it. So it's not even going to be starting to make the returns that it would hope economically from the massive investment that's gone into it.
And just in terms of positioning, the Labour Party, I get the sense that Keir Starmer isn't really saying anything. His tactic is to not say anything and hope the Conservative Party bury themselves. Would you agree?
I think that's the case with any opposition. They win power partly because the public have fallen out of love with the government rather than in love with them. I mean, I think it's easy for... I mean, I don't... David Cameron, I think, did.
Actually, your point is a really good one. So Blair was charismatic. He had a vision for the country. Keir Starmer doesn't have a vision for what he's doing in the day.
I think there's definitely a contrast between Blair and Starmer. But equally, I think people were really fed up with the Tories, weren't they?
Agreed.
I mean, John Major was laughing stock. So I think there is it's difficult for any opposition leader. I can remember this exact criticism being levelled at David Cameron. He went on to win the next election. Labour have said things. They've talked about a new deal for employment rights, giving people greater job security. I think it's been said that Rachel Reeves is going to announce some kind of infrastructure council in her speech next week. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I do think, obviously, they're going to have to expand their policy offer between now and the general election. But I think I wouldn't say it's, strikingly thin, bearing in mind they're not going to be in power for at least another year and they don't know what kind of situation they're going to inherit. So in some ways it'd be quite irresponsible to be making sort of massive promises.
It's quite interesting what you say about Rachel Reeves and setting up an infrastructure council, because part of me thinks that a government should be out there saying, look, the government is now too big, too unwieldy, costing us more than we actually bring in tax revenue, so let's scale it down. But all we ever hear now is, we'll set up a council, we'll set up a review, this is more money, more people, and so
actually she's talking about like having big private sector bodies represented on the council, so that you bring us, so that you get decisions that focused on what business needs, and you get the sort of private sector perspective in decision making, and you do things that's going to get crowd in private sector investment as well as just being public sector. I mean, I'd actually be slightly concerned that it's all, there's too much kind of big business influence in government, and that she's talking about getting huge investment firms and big businesses on this council, and not so much about unions and NGOs who might have a good idea about what's needed on the ground.
To mind.
Well, quite. And under Blair, of course, the PFIs and the hospitals, of course, are unmitigated disaster. We're still paying for them. Just in terms of that, do you think Labour has this in the bag? The reason I ask that is Starmer obviously delighted with what happened in Scotland. However, the way I would frame this is that if he hadn't won it, he'd be in serious trouble. And it's worth remembering, and I was reading back about this, Neil Kinnock had a 28-point lead, and that disappeared. So has Labour got this in the bag?
I think you can never say that it's in the bag for anyone. I don't think Labour should be taking that position. But I also don't think that we can rule out the fact that the Scottish win was a huge win.
It was.
The massive swing.
But it's a by-election.
It is a by-election. You should never read too much into it.
Turnout 30% down.
But the swing for it was so significant that they won double the amount of votes that the SNP won at that. And I think the Conservatives in this scenario should be concerned, not only for the swing, but it showed a pattern of more tactical voting, in the sense that people were voting against the SNP. They were voting so much against the Tories that they got 3.9% of the vote, meaning that they lost that fee, which is embarrassing to say the least. But it shows that people are tired and fed up. So whether Keir Starmer is putting out policies and whether people are voting them for him, or whether they're voting against them.
Do you not think in Scotland, as they get closer to the election, and both the SNP and Labour have to actually lay out their policy on gender recognition, which, as we know, brought down Nicola Sturgeon and was the final straw, that then people might start thinking, well, actually, I didn't want that policy with the SNP and I don't want it with Labour either?
I am not convinced. I think right now Scotland is battling between the SNP and Labour up there, and they're done with the SNP. I think you cut off the head of Nicola Sturgeon and the body seems to be dying a little bit alongside it.
Did you see what the leader of the SNP at Westminster said about the by-election, which I thought was really fascinating, was he said, well, the Conservative vote basically disappeared because Keir Starmer is so right-wing that Conservatives feel comfortable voting for him, and that's making it harder for the SNP. That's probably very helpful for Keir Starmer if you've got, because obviously the Tories are going to be saying, oh, he's a left-wing risk to Britain, etc. Then you've got another party saying, oh, you can't vote for him, he's too right-wing. It actually makes him sort of seem like the sort of measured one in the middle.
And that for me is the sadness, is because, and what people are saying is that they haven't really got a choice. They've got two parties which are very much two sides of the same coin. I think you're right. I think there was a lot of tactical voting. People who formerly saw the SNP as a saviour of Scotland realised that actually Scotland is in such a mess as a result of the rule of the SNP. It'll be very interesting to know. Has Labour got this in the bag very quickly?
I don't think it's in the bag, no. I think there's strong favourites, but definitely not in the bag.
Right, stay where you are. It's time for a break. After the break, we'll continue with our head-to-head. This is TalkTV. Welcome back to Talk Today with me, David Bull. The wife's in, Dr. Renée Hoenderkamp. Good morning.
Good morning.
Also, we're in the middle of our head-to-head. Joining us this morning, Luke Hillchild, Director of the High Pay Centre, and Lettice Bromovsky, who is a political commentator. Let's move on, if we may. I thought this was particularly interesting. Priti Patel, obviously, we're talking about the Tory party conference. We were talking earlier about it commanding the headlines all of the party conference season, basically controlling the narrative. Also, of course, many other conferences going on. Reform UK's today, Green Party today. We've got Labour Party starting, I think, tomorrow. What's the point of the party conference season, and who are they talking to? You, me, the press? Are they talking to each other? What's the point of them? Do they dictate policy? The number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Or you can tweet us at TalkTV, and Renée will tell you what you have to do.
You have to tweet us at TalkTV, leave a space, #BreakfastDoctors.
You looked absolutely horrified when I did that.
You know what? Because I was reading the many, many messages that are coming through on the hashtag. It's working.
I know, you're head of tweets.
Yes.
Or X's.
I'm going to need to bring a bigger screen.
You are.
Because I'm also over 50.
Are you? That can't be true. Can't be true. Right, and let's move on and talk about this. I found this particularly interesting. Priti Patel has suggested that the woke civil service should be more like the United States, i.e. have political appointments. So she says, I think we have to move to a system where essentially when you get in and you become a minister, you bring in your own political appointments, because then actually they might actually get something done. What do you think?
I think on the whole we should never look to America and how we should run our system here in the UK. I don't think they've got the best track record there. But I can understand her frustrations as the people who are meant to be apolitical, who are meant to support you, ultimately have not been necessarily over the past few years. From the leaks, from the... More recently, the criticism of the Dominic Raab scandal when he was brought down over bullying was that can anyone within the civil service simply make a complaint against a leading politician and have them brought down in scandal without much evidence behind it?
Probably one of our best ministers.
Well, yes, arguably. Luke, just in terms of that, she goes on to say, well, you don't have... You know, you're in a ministerial position, you have a great vision, you want stuff done. She says, I can't hire and fire anyone. So if the civil servants... And this goes back to yes, Minister and yes, Prime Minister. If they just say yes, Minister, and then, of course, doing the exact opposite, you can't do anything about it.
I'm a little bit sceptical about the claims. I know some people who've worked in the civil service, and they take the... apolitical aspect of it pretty seriously. Someone I vaguely know, and I suspect is personally quite left-wing, I know has a letter from George Osborne thanking them for their work implementing one of the biggest programme of public service cuts the country's ever seen. I think anyone who goes to work for the civil service, so anyone who's joined the civil service in the past 13 years has actively chosen to go and work for a Conservative government. If you joined at any point,
what happens if you're there, like many of them, they've been there for donkey's years?
Well, if they've been there for, that many years, they'll have joined a Conservative government under Thatcher or John Major. So I just think anyone who's joined the civil service knows this is a possibility. Anyone who's in any management role anywhere, you're going to have, junior employees who take a view on what you're doing and, sometimes might not think it's about the right thing. And the challenge of management is bringing people with you and persuading them. So I think there's a little bit of, blaming other people for areas where the government may not have succeeded to the degree that they would have liked.
I mean, I'm just minded of Lord MacDonald, who obviously was there, and then he said he voted Remain. He told people he voted Remain,
cried.
and they cried. And that's not. And whilst they didn't, that didn't affect. Maybe it didn't affect their political operation, but maybe it just did.
Well, it probably did, because realistically, one of the issues that I have is that no one really is apolitical. You have opinions on things, and that's completely natural. So to be asked to leave it at the door, I think is a really impossible thing to be asking people. Your views and opinions will subconsciously or consciously.
Well, I agree. And
leak
Lord
into
MacDonald,
actions.
well, he went on to say there was a sense of mourning and staff in tears, as Renée says in the Foreign Office, on the morning after the referendum result. But Lou, are you saying, so let's say you're a civil servant, you would then decide you couldn't work for the Conservatives? Are we saying that?
I think if you believed strongly in values that were totally antithetical to a Conservative government, you just shouldn't, and I think in almost all cases wouldn't go and work for the civil service. Ditto if you had really strong right-wing values.
I think the difference is, Luke, that going back 30 years ago, we had people that had been through a university system that allowed them to be challenged in their thought processes, so they knew how to handle challenge. We now have people coming out of university who have never been challenged. They're only invited to go to things with which they agree. This is absolutely seen everywhere. So when they go into the civil service, the moment that these things, migrants, whatever it's trans, start challenging them, then that's a big problem for them.
I don't know. I go into universities, do talks and stuff. I don't sort of recognise that view of what university education is like. I mean, you could be right, I could be wrong, but I just think most people going into the civil service will be aware that they're going to have to do things that the government is doing that they may not agree with. I do think Priti Patel's right. She obviously needs to be able to bring her own political advisors as well. Equally, you can't just have the entire civil service turning over its staff every time the government changes. You need people to know how it works as well.
Complicated.
And let's just move on and talk about this. This is an interview with George Osborne in The Independent. He said Nigel Farage could be the future Conservative leader because of the shift to the right. Now, obviously, Nigel Farage was at the Conservative Party conference having a lovely time.
The biggest
dancing.
celebrity there.
Biggest celebrity at the Conservative Party conference. He's not even a Conservative. And he was there with his dancing, showing off his skills. I think he was dancing with Priti Patel, wasn't he? Yeah. What was the tune? Do you remember?
I don't.
Was it You're Just Too Good to Be True? I can't remember. But anyway, he was given... Can't Take My Eyes Off You. That's what it was. And just in terms of that, and obviously he's loving the attention here.
100%.
He's honorary president of Reform UK. I just wonder, what do you think he's up to?
I don't think, although everyone's getting very excited about him coming back to the party, I do think he's perhaps slightly too narcissistic to want to jump on a sinking ship at this stage. If he is thinking about it seriously, he will do it when there's more of a chance the Conservatives will be in power. So I don't think we're going to see him return anytime soon.
I find it extraordinary. What do you think?
I don't know if the Conservatives would want him back, even the ones who are kind of on the same page as him politically. I think he's one of these people who a lot of people really love him, but a lot of people really hate him.
Yes, he's Marmite.
Exactly, yeah. And politicians like that, I think Jeremy Corbyn and Liz Truss were quite similar. Don't, as sort of leaders of mainstream political parties, don't tend to do very well.
I mean, it's quite interesting. He loves the attention, obviously, quite clearly. He was asked about the idea of joining in future. He said, let's see what happens. And he reiterates your point. They're losing they will lose the election. So I just think he's enjoying the attention. Just let's move on and talk about Just Stop Oil, because we've spoken a great deal about Just Stop Oil. I found this fascinating. Dale Vince, who's underwritten a lot of their antics, has been paying for that, says he's going to stop funding Just Stop Oil, saying further protests from the activist group would be counterproductive. Is this the end of Just Stop Oil?
I mean, what do they need funding to do? It seems they just
so they can go to the theatre and interrupt Les Mis.
Buy the tickets.
Buy the tickets, yeah. I mean, I think it's probably what you just described he's proposing. I think, if you're interested in getting the world to on a sustainable path in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and preventing dangerous climate change, I think what you just said there sounds a bit more sensible than funding Just Stop Oil.
And what do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I think they've alienated a huge amount of the public. That interview that was recently done with the Just Stop Oil person on Sky News, where she started crying.
Oh, but no tears, though.
It was
true, actually.
That was very
but
odd.
It sort of took it past the point into a kind of delusion state. She seemed a little unwell, perhaps.
It's cultish.
And so I do think they've alienated a lot of the public. They're interrupting time and time again things that are meant to be special memories for people, and I think people are just done with it.
I mean, I said this...
you know, there was a woman at that production who took her mother, who has about 4 weeks to live, as a special treat, and one of the last things she wanted to do.
Oh, gosh,
well,
thank you.
Exactly. Things like that. You're just like, who are you fighting at this point?
I know, absolutely. And, of course, just impinging on people's lives. And, as you say, special occasions, people save up for that. Yeah. It's a very important moment for many people going to the theatre, special occasions, etc. And it's ruined. And, of course, they didn't get to see the show either because it got cancelled. Interesting, I think. I said this during the week. There was a great photo of someone with a Just Stop Oil T-shirt on an aircraft.
Oh,
I mean, the height of hypocrisy. I mean, I couldn't believe what
Also, they were so brazenly kind of wearing it, like very proud.
But was that actually serious, or was it a joke? Because
who knows?
You see things like people, I think some people went to Grand Prix or something on a stag
Very good. And let's just talk about this smoking ban. I said about Rishi Sunak having a vision. Look, as medics, we don't want people to smoke. He's brought in this ban, a rolling age, so that I think people of 16 won't be able to buy cigarettes ever in their lifetime. It's slightly weird because, as I said, a 76-year-old will be queuing to buy cigarettes for a 75-year-old. Isn't this prohibition?
It's ridiculous. I think the whole thing is ridiculous. I'm sorry, but if you're going to legally allow someone at 18 to vote, you have to give them the respect and dignity to make their own life choices. And honestly, I think this is ultimately just going to be funding the black market economy. I mean, kids under 18 have never stopped them before getting cigarettes, and they definitely are smoking already anyway.
Luke?
I mean, I don't know. It does sound quite mad. I'd be interested to see what impact the evidence suggests.
There's only modelling. Only modelling.
I mean, what does presumably the modelling suggests it will stop people smoking and save the NHS money, and that's why they've done it. In which case, maybe it will work. As I say, it does sound a little mad.
I mean, I think Italy, other countries have tried this and are doing the same. Is he a copycat or a visionary?
I don't think it's particularly visionary.
You don't?
I don't think it's particularly visionary.
It's an odd thing to put into a very important conference speech.
Exactly, and that's why I felt there was such a lack of vision at conference this year, and why we haven't seen that bounce and all that. Smoking and what was it, A-levels? Like
smoking, A-levels, cancellation of HS2. They were pretty much the three.
Yeah, if you're annoyed about the cost of living, the state of the NHS, public services, or whatever, this is not going to,
the
turn
issues
it around.
that we've been hit with over the last few years, and that doesn't address any of them.
Oh, no, it's really fascinating. So it's just, can the Tories turn this around, do you think, Lettice?
I mean, never say never, but right now it's looking very, very bleak.
And Luke?
Yeah, I'd say the same thing as I said before the break. Can they? Yes. I'd say it's very unlikely.
Thank you very much to both of you for coming in. That's Luke Hildyard, Director of the High Pay Centre, and Lettice Bromovsky, political commentator, and that was today's Head to Head.